Hello, everybody. Uh, so here we are. Hello, everybody. My name is Marcio Garcia dos Santos. I'm part of BEGO's education and clinical research team, and I will be the moderator of today's session. First of all, I hope that you and your family and your beloved ones are all in good health. Welcome to the first Semados Campus Web Seminar for Professionals of 2022. I wish you all a fantastic year with lots of health and blessings. This year, we will offer for you 8 sessions, web seminar sessions, with renowned names from different countries. The list of web seminars can be seen in our webpage, in our international course catalog, which includes web seminars and also presential courses. Before introducing our speaker, I would like to thank Mrs. Angelica Jacob from BEGO's Global Marketing Department for the organization of this session. And the topic today will be CAD/CAM restorations. I believe we could not start better. And the speaker will be Professor Dr. Erhan Çonekoglu from Turkey. Professor Dr. Çonekoglu is graduated at the EG University School of Dentistry, where he received his DDS degree. He attended prosthesis program of graduate study offered by the Institute of Health Science at EG University and graduated with PhD degree at prosthodontics. He is a professor and resident at the Department of Prosthodontics, School of Dentistry at the EG University, Izmir, Turkey. He completed several scientific projects supported by national and international institutions and has been honored with more than 30 national and international scientific awards. With this project, he is author of more than 70 articles in peer-reviewed scientific journals in the field of adhesive and implant dentistry and established CAD/CAM restorative laboratory at the dental school. His clinical practice is limited to prosthodontics at the departments of Prosthodontics School of Dentistry, EG University, and Professor Dr. Çonekoglu is intensively involved in scientific research regarding adhesive dentistry and implant dentistry. His current research interest particularly covers implant periodontal interactions and their clinical outcomes. Erhan, my friend, so pleasure to have you here on our first webinar, web seminar of the year, and thanks for accepting the invitation to conduct this session. As always, at the end of the lecture, we'll have the question and answer session with the speaker, and you can place your questions in the question box during the whole presentation. I wish us all a very nice time, and I give the words to Professor Dr. Çonekoglu.
Marcio, thank you very much for the introduction. It's always very fascinating to be within the BEGO family, and this time I will be on the webinar. Thank you again for the kind invitation also. Let's start. I think approximately we have 45 minutes to 1 hour with questions and answers session, and the topic will be single tooth implantology, especially in the aesthetic zone. In the webinar, I will share 5 different subjects. The first one will be planning of the implantation regarding of the timing and timing of the insertion of the implant and the loading, as well as we will talk about the positioning of the implant a bit. Then we will assess the temporization periods. In the last part, customized abutment materials and rules for a successful restoration will also be discussed in this webinar. Now, let's start with the planning. As we know, after tooth extraction, it's a general rule. Some of the hard tissue will be lost according to with reference to Wolff's law. But on the other hand, mechanostat theory by Frost says that the re-stimulation always resists and thus balances the resorption. But inevitably, the bundle bone, especially in the labial crestal area, will always be lost, will always be resorbed. However, without that, re-stimulation via immediate implantation will not totally prevent loss of this buccal bundle bone, but as a general rule, again, it will slow down the resorption of the buccal bony plate. To sum up, immediate implantation doesn't prevent resorption, especially in the labial crestal area and the bundle bone. Therefore, in the clinic, we have to decide the perfect timing for the implantation, and the implantation timing can be divided into 4. In type 1 implantation, we extract the tooth and immediately place the implant. In type 2, we wait for approximately 8 weeks in order to get the healing of the soft tissue. In type 3, 12 to 16 weeks passes in order to provide a healing of the early bone. And in type 4, which is not desirable anymore, we have to wait more than 16 weeks. We only apply type 4 implantation in ankylosed tooth and odontogenic cysts. Interestingly, implantation survival between the immediate and late protocols doesn't differ. There is not a significant difference between them, and the percentages are really high, as you see. Now, let's talk about loading, because implantation alone is not sufficient for a successful restoration. We divide loading protocols into 3. In the first one, after implantation, we immediately make the restoration and load it. In type B, we wait for 1 week to 8 weeks to make the restoration. And in type C, we have to wait more than 8 weeks in order to make a restoration, definitive restoration, and load it. So let's combine implantation and loading protocols together. Type 1A means immediately place the implant and load it. But type 4C is place the implant after 12 weeks, for example, and wait again for more than 16 weeks to load it. Let's look at the studies regarding these protocols. The percentages are really high. According to the color codes, green ones means these boxes mean. Marcio, can you see the arrow of the mouse now? I don't think you can see the arrow. Yeah.
No, I cannot see the arrow. I just received an email, a message. Sorry to interrupt, from Dr. Iran Oskan. If the screen is shared, yes, Dr. Iran, the screen is shared. The arrow not, Erkan, but the screen is shared.
Yes, screen sharing, but I think you cannot see the arrow. You cannot see the mouse, I guess. So,
unfortunately not.
Yes, so I won't use pointer in this presentation, unfortunately. The green boxes, I mean the percentages in the green boxes mean there are lots of studies that prove that type 1, 2, 3, or 4 with late loading is very successful. However, the yellow ones here in type 1 and type 4 means there are several studies. They are not very strong studies, but again, the survival modes are really high. But the red ones means there are not enough studies, sufficient studies to prove that type 3 or 2 with A or B can be used in clinic. So these percentages mean the survival of the implants, but it's not an important thing because, as we know, a single thread in the apical portion of the implant, if it is in the bone, then the implant can be kept in the mouth with the restoration. So in the aesthetic zone, survival alone is not enough. We have to look for the success of the soft tissue, the pink aesthetics as well. Let's search some studies. Daniel Buser made some studies on it, and he says that after 1 year only, type 1 implantation, with type 1 implantation, you may have 1 millimeter of buccal recession in 20 to 30% of the patients, which is a very high complication, rate. Again, Niklaus Lang says that with type 1C, again, the immediate implantation, after 1 year, you may have 20% buccal recession regarding the soft tissue, which means the implant will be in the mouth. Again, the survival rate will be 98% maybe, but the soft tissue, the pink aesthetic success is around 70 or 80%, which is not sufficient for a clinic, for a successful clinic. So in the clinic, we have to obey some rules. And as a general rule in my clinic, I always obey the alveolar geometry rule, which is very crucial. So we have to memorize this list. It is very important, and it's a combination of two different studies that were made by Khan and Stephen Chu. So we will divide the patients into 3 main classes. In class 1, please refer that the upper central incisor, right central incisor, this one will be extracted, and we will place an implant on the side. If the tooth in the beginning has intact buccal bone plate and the soft tissue level is very good, filled with papillas, then we call it class 1, the perfect situation. But if we have a slight resorption on the crestal bone, especially on the labial area, we call it class 2. If it is in the gingival third portion of the root, we call it 2A. And the defect is, if the defect is very thin, which means it is only on the buccal portion of the root, we call it 2AV. If the defect is enlarged and extended on the distal and mesial areas of the root, we call it 2AU. And if the neighboring papilla areas, the bony areas, are resorbed, we call it UU, 2AUU. Again, if the resorption on the buccal plate is on the mid-third of the root, we call it. If the buccal bone plate is resorbed just through the apical apex, we call it 2C. So the worst case scenario is if the patient referred to the clinic with both the bony defect and the soft tissue defect, we call it class 3. Let's have a general look on this classification. As you see, class 1 is the most desired one, class 3 is the least desired one, and class A means the one, the buccal bone resorption is on the only gingival third of the root, B means the 2/3 of the root, and C means the resorption reaches the apex portion of the teeth. Again, if it is very thin and only the buccal portion of the root, we call it V-type defect. If it is enlarged to medial and distal sides of the root, it is called U-type defect. And if the papilla bony areas also resorbed, we call it W defect. Let's discuss about the success in our daily clinic protocols. There is a very strong study made by Khan, and he says that if your patient came to the clinic with type 2B/C with V defect, after 1 year, you will have a mucosal recession around 8%, which can be held in the clinic, which is not a high score. But please be very careful. If the defect is U, you will have 43% of soft tissue loss after 1 year. And if the defect is W, 100%, you will have an aesthetic deficiency. So, as a general rule, scientifically, I mean, we can make immediate implantation only on class 1 patients or class 2A and B patients with V-type defect, which is very important. Now, I will show you some cases regarding these protocols. In order to get success, please use immediate implantation on class 1 or class 2A and B patients, says the literature. So what should we do? We should, and also there are some subsidiary data regarding the implantation. If you apply immediate implantation, always you will have a gap between the bone and the implants. The literature says that you can use bony graft. It's not a must, but it causes an aesthetic benefit. You can use bone graft as an aesthetic benefit because under 1.5 millimeters, the clot stabilization can be provided, so you don't have to use a graft. Again, a very interesting study and very strong study says that if you use grafting with temporary restoration, it is very advantageous in terms of the thickness of the soft tissue on mid-third and gingival third of the restoration, of the implant restoration, which says the graft will provide you shape, contour, volume, which means aesthetic, but you cannot use it for osseointegration because this graft should be small particled cancellous graft, the xenograft. Let's talk about aesthetic zone protocols that also I use in my clinic. Let's think that a patient has come to your clinic with a defect on the buccal portion of the extracted tooth, of the tooth that is to be extracted. First, we have to measure the beginning buccal bone level of the extracted tooth. You can use Williams probe. You can use this mechanical probing before extraction, and also you can use it after. You can measure it after extraction. So we have different protocols. If the buccal bone plate is intact, we don't have any defect, and also the bone phenotype and the soft tissue phenotype are thick, and there is no infection, the literature says that you can use type 1 implantation, which means you please extract the tooth and place the implant. But which is very important, the literature says that for immediate implantation, not for the beginning, but after 1 year, the success after 1 year, thick buccal bone is crucial. So we have to consider not the vertical dimension of the buccal bone, also the horizontal dimension of the buccal bone should be considered. It should be more than 1 millimeter, and if it is 1.8 millimeters, it is very nice. But for the central teeth, it is only 5%, and for premolars, it is only 28%, the thick buccal bone phenotype. Let's talk about these protocols on some of the patients that are successful and some of the patients that are not successful in our clinic. Here is the case 1. We have a fractured, vertical fractured root here in the right, left upper central incisor. It should be extracted. And we made a treatment plan. We will extract the tooth, made an implantation, immediate implantation, and we will not change the neighboring restoration on the natural tooth. We place the implant. As you see, the defect is the defect reaches up to the apex. So it can be classified as class 2C, which means the defect is on the apex, and the defect is not very thin. It is a bit wide, so we call it class 2CU. As a general rule, according to the literature, you shouldn't place implants, you shouldn't make any immediate implantation after extraction, of course. But we did it, and we made a temporization. We also applied some soft tissue graft, autograft, and make the implantation. However, after 4 months, we have a defect in this papilla area, which is not acceptable in terms of aesthetics. So despite in the first part, the treatment planning part, we told the patient that we will apply only 1 restoration on the implants, and the restoration that was on the natural teeth on the neighboring area will not be changed. But in order to get soft tissue, in order to make a symmetrical soft tissue level and also make a papilla appearance, we changed the neighboring tooth as well. And here is the final situation, which is not successful because we don't have a papilla on the distal area of the implant, and the papilla height in the mid portion is not sufficient. But in Turkey, it is a good aesthetic. The patient is really happy with the result, but we are not happy.
Julian.
We are not happy, of course, because the papilla heights were not sufficient. Here is an interesting study. If you didn't read, please read it. It is the first study that has to be read for immediate implantation. It was made by Gallucci, who studies in Harvard University. He says that for type 1A type protocol, the dentist should be very experienced and the buccal bone plate should be intact. Also, the bone thickness and the phenotype, soft tissue phenotype thicknesses should be very well also. So let's jump into the second protocol. If we have a defect, and the defect is within the gingival third of the root, you can apply not immediate implantation, but you can wait for the soft tissue healing and you can apply type 2 implantation. So if the buccal bone is not intact and the bone and mucosal biotypes are thin, again, if you have an infection, you can apply type 2 implantation. The study says that the study made by Chapu says that 3 to 5 millimeters extra mucosa can be provided, which means 7-fold thicker buccal soft tissue. Very much volume of blood will be provided if you apply type 2 protocol. And if the defect is extended on the mid-third of the root, now we should wait for the early bone healing period and we make a socket preservation as well. Now I will share a patient regarding it. Here is a big defect on the soft tissue on the apical area because the root treatment was made not correctly by the dentist. As you see, the root was perforated by the file and the all buccal bone is lost together with the soft tissue in the apical area. What should we do? We should wait for the early bone healing because we don't have any buccal bone plate. So together with a soft tissue autograft, we made small particled xenograft. We placed small particle cancellous xenograft in the socket area for preservation and made the soft tissue repair. This operation was made by Associate Professor Nejat Nizam. And then we waited for the bone healing. For that period, we used a temporary, but that was attached to on the neighboring teeth. 4 months later, we placed the implant and make a temporization on it. Here is the restoration, immediate restoration in situ. And after healing period, now again, we don't have a papilla, but it is because the morphology of the neighboring teeth as well, because the composite resin restoration is not morphologic, is not a good restoration, and it has to be also replaced. And in the first treatment plan, we talked with the patient that also we will make a laminate veneer on the neighboring teeth. Here is the situation. The thickness and the level of the soft tissue is very nice because correct protocol was applied on the patient. Then we made a customized abutment. We will talk about this type of materials a bit later, 10 minutes later. And also we applied a veneer on the neighboring teeth. This is the first day. We just luted the restoration. Here is the starting soft tissue morphology. And here is the first day that immediately after the restorations were placed. Even in the first day, the papillas are in the correct position. So correct protocol means aesthetic result. And also the patient was very happy. So if we don't have any buccal bone and also we have thin bony and gingival biotypes, we have to apply type 4 implantation, of course. But in order to get some hard tissue volume, we should make some autogenous grafting protocols. We use titanium mesh on these patients. After 4 months of healing, now the bone was really very nice. We placed the implants. And for this patient, we decided to make a definitive immediate abutment protocol, one-time one abutment. After insertion of the implants, we scanned and manufactured a zirconia customized abutment and also make a temporary on it. After healing period, we didn't detach and reattach the abutment, and we made the restoration just on it. Also, there was a gap between the implant and the neighboring tooth, and we decided to apply a partial laminate veneer that was manufactured by CAD/CAM technology. And here is the situation after luting. The first day here, and the before and after situation. This is the appearance of the site after 4 years. Of course, it's not ideal, but please remember that the starting situation position was very strong, was very hard. So again, this patient can be classified as successful in the clinic. So from a scientific point of view, in class 1 or 2A and B with V defect patients, we can use immediate protocol, but on the others, I think we should wait for the soft tissue or early bone healing periods. The second subject is implant positioning. Of course, in terms of prosthetic appearance, after tooth extraction, we talked a bit on it. We will have a bone loss. These bone loss will be in two directions. The first one is the vertical direction. It will be around 2 millimeters, the bundle bone area, and also we will lose bone horizontally on this area. The main problem is in which depth should the implant be placed. It is very important because the main aesthetic, undesired aesthetic situations are within the incorrect depth of the placed implant. As a general rule, we always know, and also Tarnov referred to Linkevicius in his last book that was published 2 years ago by Quintessence. He says that the line between the neighboring gingival zeniths is a referral line, and the implant should be positioned, it's very important now, not more than 4 millimeters, but not less than 3 millimeters below this line. So it should be strictly obeyed in all of the patients in order to get a good emergence profile within the customized abutment or the stock abutment. Now we will talk about it. Main mistakes that are made in depth of the implant and also the gingival height of the abutment is insufficiency. If we don't place the implants in correct depth, then the restoration can be looked as this. You can see that the emergence profile is too steep and not hygienic. But we can solve these kind of problems with titanium bases because the gingival height of the titanium bases may be less than 1 millimeter, and we may gain 1 to 2 millimeters in order to get a good emergence profile. But to some extent, of course. This is the incorrect morphology of the abutment and restoration because the implant wasn't placed in a correct depth. And the worst thing, as you know, the bundle bone of the buccal area will resorb, and always for a successful treatment planning positioning of the implants, a slightly palatal position is advised, but slightly palatal position maybe is maybe crucial for the buccal bone thickness. But if the implant is not correct depth, you will have this kind of very weird, bizarre restorations. Let me show you one. As you see, the implant is not in a correct depth. You can measure the soft tissue thickness on the palatal area. It should be around 3 millimeters, but it's only 1 millimeter. So the restoration made by me is on the screen now. Very steep. The buccal area is very steep. I screwed it on the patient. Only after 12 months after, 1 year after, the situation is as it. It was only probed, and the bleeding on probing was very apparent. So according to literature made by Katafuchi, which is a strong study as well, he says that the emergence profile shouldn't be convex and shouldn't be above 30 degrees, which means this restoration should be corrected. After 1 year, I corrected it, as you see. After 2 hours, the soft tissue placed on the ground area on the abutment. And after 4 years, the situation is this. The soft tissue is very healthy now. And also after 7 years or 6 years, the situation is very good as well. So emergence profile together with position of the implants are very important parameters in terms of hygiene and aesthetic. So if you place implants slightly palatal, please do not forget to make the correct positioning in terms of depth. you should place the implants not more than 4 but not less than 3 millimeters. In this situation, if the implant position is slightly palatal, it doesn't matter. We will have a good emergence profile, which will be hygienic as well. So this is very important. In the third part, we will talk about temporization. Temporization means mock-up, pink mock-up. Now we always use mock-up in laminate veneer therapy, smile design therapy, in order to see the final situation. But we should use temporaries for temporization, for mock-up of the soft tissue, the pink aesthetics. And there are some very strong studies says that this type of pink mock-up is not only a help for the dentist, but it promotes papilla. Which means if you use grafting, or if you don't apply grafting, but you use temporary restorations, you will have thicker soft tissue. You will have more soft tissue. It promotes soft tissue. So every case in the anterior zone should be shaped, contoured with temporaries. Let's talk about morphology a bit. Let's talk about literature. The first question, what should be the morphology of the abutment neck? Literature says that you can use straight and concave type of abutment necks, but you shouldn't use convex ones, because if you use convex type of abutments, the thickness of the connective tissue will be less, so there will be less amount of blood on the papilla area, and your papilla height should be maybe compromised. As a general rule, even straight or concave, we should divide the abutment neck into two. The gingival part, the mucosal part, should possess a diameter regarding the original tooth. It should possess the emergence profile of the original natural tooth, but the other apical part of the apical half of the abutment should be narrow, like a pipe. Because if you apply a narrow customized abutment area in the apical portion of the abutment, you will have more blood, because you will have a thicker connective tissue around it, like it. But in this situation, it's very interesting. We didn't place the implant in a correct position. As you see, the implant depth is 6 millimeters. So the narrow part will be 4 millimeters. Only 2 millimeters of the gingival or mucosal part will make pressure on the mucosa and provide the emergence profile of the restoration. So the most important thing in the morphology of the customized abutment is only 2 millimeters of the mucosal area we can apply pressure on the soft tissue. Otherwise, you will always, not always, but mostly loss of soft tissue contouring. Your pink aesthetics will be compromised. This is convex type morphology, which is not desirable because the amount of connective tissue around the papilla bottom area is decreased. So in this situation, we will have less amount of blood. As a general rule, the half of the abutment should be like pipe, and the other half, the mucosal pipe, can make pressure on the mucosa and should possess the emergence profile. Like this. Narrow half, the apical half is narrow, but the mucosal half is wide and makes pressure on the soft tissue. And also we can apply this for premolars and molars as well. Here is an implant that was placed too deep. Now I'm making the final definitive restoration on it. As you see, I have a 4 millimeter of narrow part, and the apical 2 millimeter is like a premolar emergence profile. Here is the situation after 2 weeks. I have papilla, even the implant is very deep. I have a papilla because I used temporary in the healing period of this implant. Second one, it's a small trick, but very useful trick, which is in order to get a thick phenotype on the buccal side, please make temporaries 1 millimeter retruded from the mucosa, which means, for example, you decided to have a temporary restoration from your dental laboratory. You sent them a digital or conventional impression. The dental technician will grind the implant area a bit and will make a contour on the toothless extracted tooth area in order to make a shaping good emergence profile. Please tell your dental technician that he or she applies or provides 1 millimeter gap horizontally. He or she would leave a gap on the buccal part of the temporary in order to make the soft tissue thicker. And also, he or she has to make a hole. Here is an example for it. Again, a case on the central area. We made a temporary. See, the temporary on the mucosal line is 1 millimeter in the retruded position when you compare it with the natural neighboring tooth. And in this type of cases, you will always have 1 millimeter more mucosal soft tissue vertically, and also very thick soft tissue. But with the definitive restoration, of course, you shouldn't fill this gap only. You should make a pressure on the gingival part of the soft tissue and align the restoration with the neighboring tooth in terms of emergence profile on the buccal area. So before I start the definitive restoration, I add small amount of composite resin on the vestibular side of the temporary. Now my mucosal line horizontally is just like the neighboring tooth, and I have again a very thick phenotype, a buccal phenotype. Here is the finished restoration. I have a very thick buccal phenotype without any grafting, only with a different type of temporization. Here is the before and after photos of the mucosal cuff. So how can we do it? I got a temporary restoration together with an index, a pattern resin index from the dental technician. We place the implant and we will place the temporary peak abutment on the sides. Now I will check the temporary because I have to reshape my peak abutment, temporary abutment. It doesn't fit well. I can easily understand it doesn't fit because the index doesn't fit on the neighboring tooth. So I have to grind the temporary peak material a bit. It's very easy, as you know. Now it will perfectly fit because it also fits on the model and it fits on the mouth. Now I will combine them with a piece of composite resin, remove it, and make the temporization. Now the buccal portion of the temporary is 1 millimeter retruded when you compare it with the neighboring tooth. 1 millimeter retruded because the dental technician did it so. And here is the finished restoration thereafter. If you make a pressure, you will have, just look at the previous slide again. With the temporary, the mucosal level is 1 millimeter below the neighboring symmetrical tooth, but after the definitive restoration, both gingivas are in the same level. Of course, the best temporary is not the resin one. It is the tooth itself, the crown itself. We place the implant. The buccal bone plate is intact. It's very good. And we extracted the tooth due to a caries lesion. So we will reshape the original natural tooth. We will make a hole inside. We will acid etch, prime, and we will lute it on the temporary peak abutment or thigh base abutment. Now, the before and after photos, right after the implantation, 2 hours before and 2 hours after the implantation. Very interesting. If you use the natural tooth for temporary, even after 1 year, you won't have any recession on the buccal or papilla area, because here is the starting position and here is the situation after 1 year. As you see, the soft tissue level together with the papilla height are the same. And the very interesting thing is, after 2.5 years, the patient didn't come to our clinic, so we could only reach him after 2.5 years. We couldn't detach the temporary. It was the natural tooth, as you know. The connective tissue and the junctional epithelium adhered on the temporary, and you cannot detach it. It's very interesting. So adhesion can only be on the natural tooth temporaries. Here's an other example. The right central incisor is a temporary of an implant. After 4 months, we will start the final definitive procedure. Now I will detach the temporary right now. You will see an adherence of the junctional epithelium. The mucosa adhered on the temporary, which means because the soft tissue adhered on the temporary, during the healing process, it didn't collapse. But if I would use a resin temporary, I would lose some amount of vertical soft tissue in terms of vertical dimension. So adherence is very important. Adhesion is very important, even on this thin type phenotypes. Very thin type phenotype, very thin mucosal phenotype, but due to adhesion, I think we should manage the soft tissue morphology. Then, of course, we completed the task with customized abutments, with digital protocols. And finish the situation. So the best temporary is the tooth itself. Now the fourth part, we are coming to the end. Which materials should be used in terms of customized abutment restorations? We can use 4 types of materials. The first one is titanium, but in the aesthetic zone, of course, it's weird to use titanium, because if the soft tissue has a transparency, you can see very grayish appearance on the soft tissue area on the neck of the abutment. So of course we shouldn't use titanium for the aesthetic zone. There is a study made by Jung, and I guess Jung made it. He says that the thick mucosa alone is not sufficient to hide the titanium grayish appearance, because also there is also the mucosal transparency is of vital importance in terms of light transparency. So we shouldn't use titanium. Can we use zirconia abutments? Wholly zirconia abutment? No, because in 2012, the Munich group proved that if you use this type of zirconia abutments, prefabricated zirconia abutments, zirconia is very hard in terms of Vickers hardness, and it can compromise the prosthetic platform of the implant. Here is a case made by us. The titanium part of the implant was compromised, it was enlarged, it was ground by the very hard zirconia, and at the end we removed the osseointegrated implants because the prosthetic platforms were compromised. We shouldn't use this type of zirconia. Again, a late study by Romanos, he said that zirconia abutments has a higher micro leakage. So what should we use? We should use hybrid abutments. We can use zirconia on the mucosal part and titanium base on the implant part. We can combine these two. and finish the restorations, even chairside, even in a single day, single appointment. But the main problem with this type of abutments is mucosal recession after years. In this situation, the patient will not be very happy because the color difference between the glass ceramic restoration, the IMAX restoration, and the zirconia customized abutment is very high. The difference is very high. So the patient is unhappy. So what should we use? We should use glass ceramics instead. Now there are different brands that can be used. Here is my first case that was made in 2010. We shaped the mucosa, we made a digital impression on it, and then we designed the customized abutment together with the crown. The interesting part on that year was we milled the abutments and the crown from the same material. And also we made some characterization, the same characterization on the same material. What does this mean? If you use glass ceramic restoration for both abutments and crowns, you can make supramucosal margin line. So with a good cement color and cementation protocol, after luting, you won't see the margin line. If I would have a mucosal recession here on the abutment, nobody will notice it. It is perfect. The second advantage is I can polish the margin line here with burrs or with rubbers. So there won't be any excess cement in the gingival cuff, in the pocket. Also, if the screw hole is on the palatal side, we can use one piece abutments, monolithic abutment crowns with these materials. Again, we can finish these restorations in a single appointment, chair side and single appointment. Here is an example for it. It's a good material. But the main complication is that we have different IMAX CAD blocks for the restoration part. For example, we can use HT, which means high translucency, or MO, which means medium opacity. If the IMAX that was used on the restoration and the abutments are not the same, you cannot make a supramucosal margin line, because these two materials, even they are the same glass ceramics, will look differently. So please be careful to use the same material for the abutment and the restoration itself in order to make a good characterization. How about the literature? Lithium disilicate, which is IMAX or Sapronity, are very strong materials. You can use them on the anterior and the posterior side. And also regarding biological complications, zirconia, polished or machined one, is definitely better than ceramic or lithium disilicate, which means for a better mucosal adherence, adhesion, you can use polished zirconia. And you can make, again, a single restoration, a single monolithic abutment crown, but the gingival or the mucosal portion shouldn't be glazed, only polished. But again, for me, in the aesthetic area, mucosal recession risk is more important to me. So I use only glass ceramic material for custom abutments on the anterior side. The second one is margin position. Margin position is very important because the margin line shouldn't be more than 1 millimeter subgingivally, submucosally. If so, we can face some problems. Here I want to share one case. The patient came to the clinic with a color problem. The implant crowns on the lateral teeth were not in coincidence with the neighboring natural teeth, and also we had some inflammation on the mucosal area. We promised the patient to make a very good aesthetic restorations, but after detaching the crowns, we noticed that the margin line of the abutments were too deep. They were very subgingivally placed, located, and after removing them, we noticed some excess cement on the abutment neck. and the patient lived with this abutment more than 4 years. So of course, these abutments are not suitable for the patient because the implant depth is very good. It is not more than 4 millimeters, not less than 3 millimeters, but the height of the gingival height of the abutment is not correct. So we made the case with 2 new crowns, but not only two new crowns, also with 2 new customized abutments. Here is an example. Now I will compare the existing abutment together with the new CAD/CAM abutment. They are on the same level now, but please refer to the margin line. They are very different. So the dentist that made the first restorations exactly cannot remove the excess cement, cannot clean the excess cement on the abutment tank because it's too deep. He cannot locate the probe and make the cement out of the pocket. So here is the final situation without inflammation, and also the color integrity was not bad. So margin depth can be easily arranged with CAD/CAM technology, as you know. After scanning of the restoration, you can easily look to the abutment neck from the gingival, the apical portion of the implant, apical point of view, and you can draw the margin line wherever you want. You are free to draw it. So now we are coming to the end, but out of implantology, I want to talk about a little bit new materials for the restorations and also for temporary abutments. As a dentist, as a chairside lover dentist, I used CEREC technology for more than 11 years now. But for the last year, I jumped into the printing technology, 3D printers, and I bought a Varsio XS. I don't know if you use it. It is very interesting. I'm totally fell in love again in dentistry. My protocol in the clinic is I make STL files via iOS, the digital intraoral scanner, and send the STL data to a design center. And also in my home country, in Izmir, we have lots of them. And the finished restoration in STL form is sent to my printer and is to be printed. Now I will share a case, but a veneer case, a very strong veneer case with these materials. I will use definitive Varsio Smile Crown material for this protocol and finish the restoration within only 1 appointment. You can also finish the restoration within one appointment. Here is a patient. The gingival health is not very good, and the morphology, the contouring of the gingiva is not very perfect, ideal. So we decided with the patient to remove the existing composite resin restorations. We made the preparation. We removed all the restorations, and we added canines to the smile design therapy. Also, we talked with the patients. Thereafter, we made a scanning, sent the data to the design center, and they sent us an approval, a design for approval. Here are the laminate veneers. And in the clinic, after approval, we took the STL data, and with the definitive resin, we milled all the 6 restorations out of this resin material, the hybrid ceramic material. Here is the situation. Here is the finished and glazed laminate veneer, printed laminate veneer. And for 6 months, in order to get a good gingival contouring and good health, we luted the restorations with a temporary resin material. Here is the in situ. 1 week later, here is the 1 month situation in situ. As you see, the gingival contouring is slowly accomplished. Here is the 1 month situation. And 6 months later, the task has been accomplished. Now we will make the definitive ones, but I'm not very reluctant to remove these restorations because also they are very nice. Now the last part, we will continue with the crown restorations. Here is the case that I finished in 2005. And in national and international lectures, I talked about this case, that it was a very successful case. I love this case too much. Maybe some of you also experienced, you heard the same thing in one of the lectures. Here is the situation after 12 years. The right lateral tooth is an implant tooth, and I loved it too much. But recently in literature, the literature says that the papilla heights should be symmetrical. Look, now the implant restoration and the symmetrical natural tooth are at the same incisal level, same gingival level, same distal papilla level, but they are not on the same medial papilla layer level, because my restoration had a contact problem, because maybe 15 years ago I wasn't aware of it, but now I'm very aware of it, because the dentist should make the perfect contact position, contact point location on the restoration, final restoration. So what is the problem with it? The problem is we have some blood flow from the periost and also from the periodontal ligament area, and we have some rules. For example, between two natural neighboring teeth, you will have a 5 millimeter papilla height from the crestal level of the bone and the contact position of your restoration. And if you are making a bridge restoration, the gingival papilla height will be 6.5 millimeters between the pontic and the abutment tooth, because now your papilla bottom area is enlarged, extended. Again, between the two pontics, you will reach up to 6 millimeters. For example, here in this case, I made a 4-unit monolithic zirconia restoration, and I have a papilla between the two pontics, which looks very aesthetic. The emergence profile is good. Also, I make it on the implant restorations as well with temporaries. Between the two pontics, I have a very good papilla height. Again, another implant situation, when we remove the restoration after 2 years, I will have good ovate pontic areas together with good papilla height between the implant abutments and the pontic areas. So the situation between a natural tooth and implant is 4.5 millimeters in terms of papilla height, and between two implants we can reach up to only 3.5 millimeters, which means we should place the contact position perfectly. Here is a case. We place the implant, immediate implantation and immediate restoration. During the restoration, I leave the contacts off and made a radiograph, measure the thickness, the diameter of the implant on the radiograph. It is 4.5, but indeed it is 4.1. So I have a magnification ratio of 1.1. I will have 4.5 millimeter papilla height. If I multiply it with 1.1, I will have 5 on the radiograph. So I measure the 5 millimeter papilla height from the neighboring tooth bone level. And here is my contact position. Again, on the patient's mouth, I will label it. Sorry, yes, I will label it, and I will fill here the contact area with composite resin, flowable composite resin, and leave a gap around 1.5 millimeters. Only after 2 weeks, you will see that all the area will be filled with papilla, because here I have exactly 4.5 millimeters of papilla gap. I left 4.5 millimeters of papilla gap. Here is the situation after 4 years. So another method which is applied by Dennis Tarnow, and it's very easy method. You can make a mechanical probing on the neighboring teeth in order to assess the crestal bone level of the neighboring teeth. And you can make a contact on the right 4.5 millimeter distance from the crestal level. Here is the one complication that I missed. Here is the case I made a temporization, and after 1 year, the papilla is not, the embrasure area is not filled with papilla because when I looked on the radiograph, I realized that I put the contact area on the 7th millimeter, but I should have located it on the 5th millimeter. So what did I do? I detached the crown and make a correction with ceramic layering and reattach the crown again. So I should have make it on the temporization, also in the first design of the definitive restoration. Last slide, contact point means the tooth form. Here is a dentist. She came to our clinic with this definitive restoration. We made bleaching on her, so the color difference is undue. So the main problem with this restoration is the lateral implants do not have papilla, but may have papilla because the general rule wasn't considered. As a general rule, the dentist should have measured the distance between the contact position and the crestal bone level. As we measured, the contact point should be located 1.8 millimeters above the papilla height. So we made a customized abutment on it, and immediately after, we made the definitive restoration, but with perfect contact position location. Here is the final situation. If you measure the distance between the crestal bone area and the contact, your papilla will exactly fill, your embrasure area will be filled totally with papilla. But here is the right side of the dentist. Now the left side of the dentist refers to a complication, because as a general rule, we shouldn't apply implants in the lateral tooth area if the distance, mesiodistal distance, is below 6.7 millimeters. Here is the case. The distance is only 6 millimeters, the mesiodistal distance. We made the customized abutment again on the left side as well, but we couldn't have a perfect papilla height here because the bottom area of the papilla is not sufficient. The blood volume here is not appropriate to feed the papilla height, to maintain as 4.5 millimeters of papilla height. Here is the right side. The distance is 7 millimeters. We managed it, but on the right side, we couldn't manage it because the distance is only 6 millimeters. Marcio, thank you very much. I finished the presentation, and if I can have some questions regarding the presentation.
Well, Erhan, what you say? Thanks a lot for the presentation. As always, you have been very didactic, and you showed the importance of a correct diagnosis and planning of the case. Now, planning is the key word. Lots of colleagues, they forget, but planning is the key word, because, sorry if I'm going to say something stupid, the protocol of drilling and placing an implant in general is not a big deal. But by far, we can treat the clinical cases like if they would be all the same. And this is exactly what you show, nah? Everywhere, in every region of the mouth, but especially in the aesthetic region. And this you show spectacularly. This is very challenging. You made a didactic presentation for this challenging of the topic. Which is very vast, so of course you cannot cover this in only 1 hour. So thank you very much for giving us a very nice introduction, and also for the colleagues, only as an information. If Corona situation allows us, we are going to have a course with Professor Dr. Cananluglu in Istanbul in May, 13th of May. And there's going to be 1-day course, and the topic will be digital approach, the peri-implantary pink and white static. So
yes,
so the information is in our webpage. Thank you very much. We have some questions. Thank you, my friend. We have from the colleague David Dimeshki from Russia. How are you, David? Thanks a lot for the presentation. Great. Thank you very much. Two questions. Now, the first one, which implant neck do you prefer in the aesthetic zone? Polished, machined, or completely treated shoulder? And the second question, the all-on-one step, which I believe here he's talking about one abutment one time. So does the use of a temporary abutment matter, or do everything on a permanent abutment, the temporary crown, and then after the permanent crown already in the permanent abutment? So please.
Yeah, the first question, the finishing of the implant is important, of course, but to me the protocols are more important, as I mentioned in the first part of the presentation. So you can work with any implant in the correct within correct protocol. Of course, if you cannot obey the perfect protocol, maybe machined surface on the connective tissue attachment may be more beneficial, I can say. But I can talk a lot on the second topic, because also we have some studies that were published in very strong journals. A one-time, one abutment concept is very beneficial in terms of the maintaining of the soft tissue, because the connective tissue and the junction epithelium can be adhered on the machined or polished zirconia surface. So you will not have any resorption after 1 year due to the biological migration, the biological width migration. Also, we have some studies on it. So the perfect material for definitive abutment is, of course, zirconia. Polished zirconia. We couldn't get same results on Emax abutments because the Emax abutment surface is not very stable, hydrolytically degraded surface. The connective tissue may adhere on the Emax abutment surface, but 1 year later the surface itself is detached from the lower layer, so the biological width cannot be held, cannot be kept on the place. But again, I said, you can have only 1 millimeter soft tissue apposition with one-time one abutment, so it is not an important, it's not a big deal. If you place the implant within 3 to 4 millimeters, you can use Emax abutments. Even after 1 year, you will have a 1 millimeter bone loss due to biological width migration, but the final situation, the pink and white aesthetics, will not be compromised.
Thank you very much. We receive also a question from Dr. D. Lara, which is asking if you use the Lisi abutment with tie-based abutment. I don't know if it means the Lisi, there is this lithium disilicate material from the company Gicina. So I don't know if you have experience with the Lisi material, or what can you tell us?
My studies were sponsored by only one company, so I used only lithium disilicate material, but I think the same will apply on the lithium silicate material, the Sirona material as well.
Okay, thank you
because
very
it
much.
Contains glassy matrix.
Yes. Maybe you can tell us a little bit. You put your YouTube page there. Maybe tell a little bit about it. This probably will be very interesting if you can share with us.
Yeah, we started to make some videos and in 2 languages. The Turkish page with Erhan Çömlekoğlu and the other one is tips and tricks. And I will share some new techniques and new materials, new material videos there. So we are doing something on that pages. Thank you.
And the colleagues, they can subscribe to the page. They can subscribe.
And they can subscribe. Sometimes we make live shows, but we don't record them. So in live shows, we treat patients live patients. For example, we make and customized abutments within only 2 hours after implantation, and we share it. But of course, due to some regulations, we cannot record and place them on the page, but they can easily subscribe and follow that live videos.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Nice question here from Dr. Marwan. Great presentation. Thank you, Professor. Can we use glass ceramic abutments? I believe not as I understood, not restorative material, but glass ceramic abutments on the premolar area due to the occlusion pressure. Maybe you can tell both. So glass ceramic material and glass ceramic abutments.
Yeah. You can use not only on premolar area, also on molar area. There are lots of studies. The New Yorkers, the New York group made lots of studies, Da Silva group, lots of studies on lithium disilicate materials. But to me, I didn't make any mechanical studies on lithium disilicate on the posterior area. But to me, on the posterior area, premill abutments with titanium and also zirconia abutments will work better because they don't contain any glassymmetrics and they don't have any crack problem. But with Emax abutments, I have some patients that work more than 11 years now with Emax abutments. They work, but we also faced with some fractures on the molar area. But they are not significantly, they are not very significant statistically.
I would like to place a question. I saw that you showcases with the Varceo Smile Crown Plus for veneer. Are you using? I don't know if all participants know now. It's a hybrid material, so a composite with ceramic particles. Are you using this for together with tie-based abutments? And if yes, are you using for provisional, for final restoration? We know we have the indication for single provisional crown on tie-based abutment, so without occlusion. But here we are in a group, so not official. So
I can say one thing. I won't, in my lifetime, I won't even grind a block again for a single restorations. I will. I'm sure that I will finish all my single tooth restorations with printing technology. I am in love with Smile Plus, really. But of course, we started some studies on it, mechanical studies and biological studies. Now we are conducting 3 different studies with this material. I can only say that I won't place it inside the mucosal cuff. I can only use it with Emax abutment, but definitive restoration on the Emax customized abutment. I can use it, but I won't place it in the mucosal cuff because it's not scientifically proven yet. But with onlays and the crowns, laminate veneers, I'm in love with that material. It's very fast, very good.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, which is big as you know. So thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you, Marcio. Thank you, BEGO family. Thank you.
You're part of it. Yeah, I believe these were the questions. We received some congratulations, and we were more than 100 colleagues here on this evening. So thank everyone for attending this first web seminar of the year. And yeah, dear Erhan, looking forward to meet you in person soon in Istanbul or some congress around Germany or some other congress around, but looking forward to meet you soon, my friend.
Thank you very much, Marcio. Goodbye, everybody.
So thank you, everybody. So as the moderator of the session, I'm finished it, and see you all in our next webinar. Will be next month with Dr. Matej Kulis from Slovenia. Thank you very much. Good evening to everybody.